Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, we invite you to listen to part 3 of the series. Chapter 26. A Fish Hook Without Bait. General Deng, what do you think I'm doing here next to the lake? Deng Ju answered, Your Highness, perhaps you are cultivating skills in martial arts while breathing the air of heaven and earth at the dawn of the new sun. Xia Ji shook his head. Deng Ju tried again, Is Your Highness contemplating how to take over the imperial palace and the imperial city? Xia Ji shook his head once again. Deng Ju replied once more, Then is Your Highness thinking about how to solve the turbulence in the imperial city? Xia Ji still shook his head. Deng Ju sighed, I truly have no idea. Your Highness, do enlighten me. Xia Ji said simply, I'm fishing. With that, his hands reached out to pick up his teacup and he took another sip of tea. Deng Ju was curious. Your Highness, there is no fishing rod and no bait. How are you fishing? Xia Ji laughed. There is a type of strange fish under the heavens that remains invisible under the water and is undiscoverable. Even the most skilled fishermen will never be able to catch them as they are deeply hidden. They will escape at the sight of bait and can only be hooked without bait. Deng Ju's expression was filled with confusion. I am slow on the take. I do not understand what Your Highness means. Xia Ji took out the tiger tally from his pocket and passed half of it to Deng Ju. General, lead the Imperial City Army out of the Imperial capital after 3 days and take them to the northern camp for training. Deng Ju accepted the tiger tally, baffled. He looked utterly bewildered as he could not fathom the meaning of His Highness's actions. Xia Ji took another sip of tea and changed the topic. I'd like to ask General Deng something. Do go ahead, Your Highness. Is there a method of reference for the strong and weak of this world's powers, or any categorization such as realms? Deng Ju was stunned. His Highness had clearly demonstrated his mighty power as a warrior who had surpassed his peak during the last few days of major battle. How could he not know this? With that, Deng Ju collected his thoughts and mentally organized the information he had obtained for more than half his life, then explained slowly. In this world, anyone who has cultivated physical skills or internal skills good enough to pass the thresholds of becoming a warrior, and also possesses a few commoner skills up his sleeves as well as having the experience of being out in the world, would be recognized as part of the brotherhood of martial artists. However, unless others are aware of what skills you have cultivated and the level of said skills, no one will be able to give you a ranking. For such a case, it would require you to create a name for yourself in the martial arts world. This would not only serve to validate what you have learned, but also to confirm your position in the martial arts world. There is the heaven ranking, earth ranking, and mortal ranking in the martial arts world. The warriors on the mortal ranking are recognized elites from the martial arts world. The earth ranking is composed of first-class masters. The heaven ranking, on the other hand, is composed of superior-class masters. If you want to prove yourself, you will need to get your name onto the rankings. However, there is also another category of people besides those of the mortal, earth, and heaven rankings. These people do not belong on the rankings. This is because they have achieved the peak on the path of martial arts, and have created divine forms by resonating with heaven, earth, and space. For example, the Black Buddha's form created by Your Highness, or the 3-headed and 6-armed form of Azura, or the divine form of the flying dragon created from one swing of the black and white double blades, and many other such examples. To put it simply, these are all fairly unimaginable. Or rather, it would be impossible to judge who is strong and weak among such people. These individuals would hide themselves away from the world, otherwise, there will be a huge commotion once they display their powers to the world. They will be known as legends once they have taken part in and resolved several major events. Once Your Highness's reputation starts spreading beyond the northern lands, you will become a legend. Xia Ji thought about this in detail. He had the internal skills of the inner vitality of the 9 suns, the physical skills of the 18 levels of hell suppression energy, the Aryakalanatha form, and even his spirituality possessed Trailokya Dhyana. Every skill and power of his was capable of creating Buddha forms. Did that mean he was already at the peak? However, this did not make him happy at all. Instead, he asked, General, do you know what is the maximum level for skills? Deng Ju replied, the ninth level is the maximum. All concepts of skills stop at the ninth level, which means that is the pinnacle of achievement. Xia Ji asked, has there ever been a 10th level? Deng Zhu answered, perhaps it is simply due to my ignorance, but I have never heard of any mention of the 10th level. Xia Ji was silent for a moment before he pressed on, what about other powers besides those of warriors? Deng Zhu took a sip of tea to wet his throat and continued the explanations. The ninth level exceeds the ordinary, converting the mind and intentions into divine forms whose names will become legends. This would be the pinnacle of an individual's power. To my understanding, the next step to pursue after that would be about spellbinding military formations, divine weapons, type of species, etc. There are people in this world who have grasped the secret of mysterious spellbinding formations. They are known as gods of combat. Such people possess powerful spellbinding formations that are able to fuse thousands, millions, even tens of millions of people's strength into one, culminating it into one terrifying offensive blow. Anyone would end up obliterated when faced with such power, but spellbinding formations are a very mysterious order. Few are able to command them. I have only seen it once long ago, and what I saw astounded me. I wanted to find out more by making investigations about it throughout the lands, but my efforts were in vain as no one knew about it and I ended up with an inconclusive result. As for divine weapons, legend has it that only a gifted person of great wisdom is able to refine such an item, but most of the existing specimens are remnants from wars of the olden days or inheritances passed down by ancestors. Another story tells of great Buddhist scholars who are able to refine Buddhist instruments, but I have never seen one in my life. Such instruments surpass all domains of the path of martial arts and are able to garner a victory in battle in one fell swoop. As for species, you have also seen it for yourself, 7th Imperial Prince. An example would be the abnormal existence of the frost giants. Once they are fully grown, they can be much stronger than any warrior who has worked hard in cultivating. Their blood lineage alone is enough to go up against a human who has cultivated extensively the most supreme skills. According to legend, there still exist many other strange creatures. Some of them need only be fully grown and humans would never stand a chance against them. Xia Ji asked, what about immortal weapons and demonic blades? Deng Zhu answered, immortal weapons and demonic blades contain embryos of intelligence, but almost all of those embryos are not awakened. They end up waiting for new masters over and over in an endless loop of time, and jeopardize their masters over and over until they vanish. From the world of martial arts. These immortal weapons and demonic blades can gift their masters some extent of power, but at the same time, they disrupt their masters' minds. However, if these weapons were to be truly awakened, I have no idea what would happen. I have never heard of such a thing happening, but I imagine that anyone who possessed it would have a great advantage over others. These weapons might even surpass divine weapons, but if the master of such a weapon is unable to control it, I'm afraid that person would end up perishing in a mad state of insanity. Xia Ji nodded. This was information he had never been able to obtain while being trapped alone deep within the palace. Today, he had been informed in full, wholeheartedly by a veteran general, and he considered it his initial understanding of this world. At the same time, he had been given an idea of the positioning of the power he possessed. Even though he knew that his power was considered to be at its peak, he was not pleased by the news. It was still not enough. He felt that his achievement of reaching the peak might simply be a case of him not knowing enough of this world. Maybe he had not even discovered the tip of the iceberg of this world. He did not feel delighted over his achievement, rather, it served as a warning for him. After that, the two continued chatting over more casual matters. Deng Zhu chose to take his leave after a while. When he returned to his mansion, Deng Zhu instructed his eldest son, Deng Gongjiu, to return to camp and make arrangements for the soldiers. Deng Zhu himself, however, walked around his courtyard with the 7th Imperial Prince's words reverberating in his mind. He could not figure out the true meaning behind his intentions. Suddenly, he spotted a young girl dressed in purple practicing her sword skills. Her form was rather impressive. Every slash was forceful and during each final motion of the sword, a ringing tremble would sound through the air. It was clear that she had cultivated internal skills. The young girl in purple stopped practicing when she spotted Deng Zhu. She ran toward him and called out warmly, "Grandpa." Deng Zhu stared into the bright, intelligent eyes of the young girl and immediately voiced out the thing troubling his mind. "Kongchan, do you know of any strange fish in this world that would swim away at the sight of bait, yet get hooked in the absence of bait?" This beautiful, young girl in purple was the granddaughter of Deng Ju, Deng Kongchan. She had just turned 16 this year, and when she heard the strange question voiced by her grandfather, she was taken aback and shook her head in bewilderment. Deng Ju could not help laughing. His Highness was 17, after all, and was instilled with Zen. Kongchan was only 16, so how could she know the answer? Deng Ju decided not to continue questioning her, but said immediately, "I'll be leaving for the northern camp with your father after 3 days to train our soldiers. Don't create trouble at home and remember to work hard at practicing the Deng family sword skills and mental cultivation methods." "Yes, I will." With that, the young lady in purple left to continue her practice. Deng Ju watched her back and continued to think about his query. Suddenly, a thought flashed in his mind and he felt he was coming close to an answer. A strange type of fish exists in the world that stays well hidden in the water. They remain obscure, and no matter how skilled a fisherman was, he would be unable to find them because they remain so deeply hidden and swim away at the sight of bait. Is His Highness referring to the many invisible enemies hidden in the imperial capital who would bring upon great calamity in the future? Close to 100 soldiers had been executed previously because of the interference of such an enemy, but His Highness has no idea who these people are. He is unable to do anything despite his power, Deng Ju mumbled. He walked to and fro as he continued talking to himself. That is why High Highness said that only without bait would the fish be hooked. Does His Highness want me to take the army and leave the imperial capital in order to draw out the enemy and trap them in one swoop? Even so, why is His Highness acting so impatient about this? Wouldn't it be best to keep me within the imperial capital and stabilize the situation? As long as I am around, even if contemptuous buffoons were scheming against him, they would still need to consider that I control more than 20,000 elite soldiers. This doesn't make any sense. Deng Ju thought about it longer and suddenly was able to vaguely understand. His Highness. He might be looking incredibly far ahead and has incomparable ambition. One must stabilize internally before facing foreign aggression. He wanted to clear the imperial city of internal enemies before he had to face the real enemy coming from the outside. If that was the case, who was this external enemy? Deng Ju instinctively thought of 2 words, Imperial Emperor. His breathing became faster. Chapter 27. The Enemy Hidden Within the Fog. Xia Ji sat quietly beside Lake watching while contemplating Deng Ju's explanation of the powers within this world. Deng Ju's description might not be entirely correct. He was but an old general who had spent his entire life in the military. There were many things in life he might not have witnessed. It was as if Xia Ji was standing on part of a land that was covered in darkness and fog, and Deng Ju had pushed only some of the fog around him away. That was all. From the little he could see through the fog, Xia Ji was able to determine that he was invincible. Even if he was not, he was at least someone at the known peak, but what about outside the fog? There was 3,000 years worth of history that could be traced back before the Shang dynasty. That era from 3,000 years ago was known as the end of ancient times. Legend has it that at the end of that period, a huge war like no other had broken throughout the land. It was also during that time when many myths and legends had started to spread down the generations. Among those myths were many stories about rivers boiling, the earth shifting, and the other exaggerated descriptions of the sun and moon vanishing. As for how long this ancient era lasted, no one really knew. Besides that, Deng Ju's mention of spellbinding military formations, ancient divine weapons, and strange species were things that should not be ignored. As for the powers of different realms, it should be simple enough to work out. Anyone who had not cultivated to the level of creating divine forms were people who belonged to the martial arts world. Those who had cultivated divine forms would be considered as achieving the threshold of being legends. Xia Ji laid backward slightly as he continued his train of thought. The skill beads I have garnered only exist in 5 colors: white, green, blue, purple, and gold. For red skill beads, I would need to collect a few unique gold skill beads to attain them. The only red skill bead I have, the one for Trailokia Dhyana, has brought me many benefits. Even if the benefits were not direct, the use of the bead is still quite exceptional. For example, it is able to fuse various skills at one go. Or use the power of the 3 Buddhas in Trailokia Dhyana to create Buddhist instruments. Or it could be transformed into a spiritual barrier with the power to suppress. To create a Buddha or divine form would require skill beads more powerful than the gold skill bead, or a purple skill bead that has been cultivated to the 9th level. The 9th level is the maximum for skill conceptualization, but what happens after that limit? Is it possible to achieve the 10th level? The 10th level aside, the most important thing for me is to make good use of my current advantage, which is the golden finger. I should continue strengthening myself with this winning edge. However, I've gone through many rare books and only managed to gather mostly white and green skill beads. I'd need to use 100 of them, which requires a great amount of spirituality and focus to fuse them to barely be able to acquire a light purple skill bead. And this is the weakest type of purple skill bead. If that is the case, how will I be able to acquire gold skill beads? Where in the world could numerous philosophical, ancient books of great influence be stashed away and hidden? Xia Ji rubbed the space between his eyes. I'll get the guards to move the nobles' books into the palace and later visit the surrounding temples for a look after the situation here has settled down. He turned his thoughts to other matters and took out the token of authority for 800 soldiers of sacrifice left behind by the steward, and examined it curiously. This was a token made out of dark iron. Besides the material being heavy, it also felt ice-cold in his hands. The carvings were detailed, but other than that, there was nothing special about it. However, this little token had the power to give orders to 800 soldiers of sacrifice. They gave their full allegiance to whoever held the token, and not to anybody else. Xia Ji explored the token with a thread of his spirituality and discovered something strange within it. To put it simply, this was a divine weapon. He ordered 2 members of the Imperial Soldiers of Sacrifice to see him with the intention of experimenting. Both of the soldiers of sacrifice did not look physically different from the normal guards. There was light in their eyes. They sounded quite well-spoken. Their backgrounds checked out as well, and they were not people who had appeared out of nowhere. Apart from their slightly more vicious work ethic, everything about them seemed normal. However, when it came to questions about the token, both soldiers of sacrifice would only say, "He who has the token is our master." He waved the token in his hands and both soldiers of sacrifice kneeled. "Master." Xia Jia held onto the token and suddenly looked at one of them. "Jump into the lake." The soldier of sacrifice did not even hesitate as he turned toward Lake Watching and leaped into it. Xia Ji turned to the other person. "Kill yourself with the sword." This soldier of sacrifice did not hesitate either. He gave his left finger a flick and his sword was released from the sheath. He quickly grabbed the sword with his right hand and swung it toward his neck without a moment's pause. As the sword was about to slice through his neck, Xia Ji immediately said, "Stop." The sword in the soldier of sacrifice's hand stopped immediately at the word, but a bloody wound had appeared on his neck. Even though he did not slit through his windpipe, he was still bleeding. It was clear that he was about to follow through with the command to kill himself. Xia Ji looked at the soldier of sacrifice who was thrashing about in the lake while wearing light armor. "You. Get out of the lake. And you, bandage your wounds. Both of you, carry on guarding the Imperial Palace." They replied in unison, "Yes, Master." "You may take your leave." "Yes, Master." After the soldiers of sacrifice left, Xia Ji played with the token in his hand while he mumbled, "It looks like the imperial family has some divine weapons in their hands, but weapons of such a caliber would not be enough to defeat the frost giants." The imperial emperor retreated not because the Shang dynasty was weaker than Guifang, but because the plans made by the Shang dynasty were spread out too ambitiously. Guifang had taken down the wolf restraining pass too quickly and had come toward the imperial capital too swiftly. That was why the imperial emperor was forced to abandon the city so soon. If you truly looked into this, the Shang dynasty is made up of many strange and curious people. Who knows how many powerhouses are hiding in the wild? Ultimately, Guifang should not be much of a match to the Shang dynasty. At the mention of divine weapons, Xia Ji suddenly thought about the prayer beads he had been carving using Tathagata meditation. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Buddha speaks of mukti, otherwise known as spiritual liberation, but creating a Buddhist instrument means it would be used for binding something. If that is so, what is it used to bind? If he was able to attain enlightenment on this, would he be able to defend himself to a certain extent when facing other Buddhist instruments? He took out his 33 prayer beads with the idea of testing out something on them. He focused his mind and soul on this Buddhist instrument. With that, a thought emerged from him. The prayer beads vanished once again, turning into a golden glow within the palm of his hand. Xia Ji turned his palm toward himself and slapped himself on the body. The golden glow immediately expanded as it became bigger, forming a gold as it completely submerged into his body. The gold disappeared as it transformed into a bundle of gold rope-like lights under his skin, rendering him motionless. Xia Ji could no longer control himself as he allowed some evil thoughts to form in his mind. With the emergence of these evil thoughts, the golden lights bound him up even tighter than before. The more active his evil thoughts, the more powerful the strength of the binding. The next moment, an immense amount of Zen exuded from Xia Ji's entire being as he went into a spellbound state. The evil thoughts in his mind vanished in an instant. All that exists do not exist, all that is evil are not evil, all that are obstinate are not truly obstinate. All that is immaterial are material, yet all that is material are immaterial, all possessions are about control, yet all have no control. He could feel the words in his heart. After he was done with this paragraph of prayer, he took a step forward with a smile on his face, and the strength that was binding him vanished in an instant as the golden light became increasingly loose. After he had taken 3 steps, the gold color under his skin was now shining through his pores as they formed collectively once again into his prayer beads and fell with a smack onto the ground beneath the tree. Xia Ji picked up the prayer beads and kept them in his pockets. It binds one's doing and not the person. If there is no malice in one's doing, one will be released by default. This is a Buddhist instrument containing the principle of Buddhist law and truly resonates with the philosophy of Buddha's teachings. Xia Ji removed all distracting thoughts from his mind as he decided to increase more prayer beads to the collection of 33 he had. It was clear that the more beads he had, the stronger their effect. His trump cards would increase tremendously. Most people in this world could only own divine weapons through inheritance, but he was more than capable of manufacturing his own. Since the ultimate limit to skills seemed to be at the 9th level for now, he could use other methods to expand his advantages besides searching for more books. The wooden box contained 75 wooden beads that had just been carved. He took one out and made a virtual point on the wooden bead's surface with his finger. The core of Tathagata meditation spilled with compassion all over the wooden bead, bestowing the power of Buddha over it. The wooden surface indented on its own as gold liquid flowed throughout it like a golden dragon, forming a gold. He lifted his finger. He placed the prayer bead into the wooden box and took another one out. The morning breeze became gradually warmer. He had carved 30 beads without realizing it and his accumulated fatigue began to show. Xia Ji restrung his prayer beads and formed a string of 63 of them. He placed them in his pocket and took a deep breath as he lifted his head to look into the distance. The warm breeze blew across the surface of the lake while a mixture of pitiful wailing and furious roars entangled within it. By the time these voices had arrived with the breeze, they had already faded. It was heaven in the palace, but outside the palace, it was hell. Xia Ji stood up and looked afar. Right now, there was major chaos after the battle, happening right outside the imperial city. A huge number of people had lost their homes, many had died, and the chaos was all caused by the vast number of refugees pouring in. It was quite easy to solve this problem. All that was needed was to open up the imperial city's granary and it would be enough to feed these refugees for days, but the problem would continue after 7 days, which might then erupt into bigger turbulence. Xia Ji gave instructions to the guards and changed into casual clothes as he headed out of the palace, bringing along 2 soldiers of sacrifice with him. Xia Xiaosu had opened up the granary 2 days ago and had set up many stalls around the city serving up kanji to help the refugees. He wanted to take a look. After all, it was impossible that his invisible enemies would not use this opportunity to create more trouble and mayhem. Chapter 28. If karma does not come for good and evil, then I will be karma. The streets of the imperial capital no longer had a prosperous air to them. The war had turned the entire place into a living hell. Several millions of refugees pouring in from the east. Wave after wave of refugees. Refugees who lost their homes. Refugees with neither food nor clothes. Snowstorms. A short trip across the bridge would often reveal the sight of a freshly frozen corpse under the bridge. It was noontime. There were no longer the usual bustling noises of stall owners crowing to promote their wares. There was only silence and low sounds of pitiful wailing. Xia Xiaosu had opened up the palace's granary. She was wearing the clothes of a normal palace maid as she pushed the kanji cart out onto the street. She lifted her arms and rubbed her eyes, sighing slightly. She waited until the kanji cart was properly set up. Many refugees instantly crowded toward her in a rushed frenzy. The guards hastily tried to maintain order as they shouted, queue up, everyone. There's enough for all." The people, the experience of the cruelty of war still fresh in their minds, eventually started queuing up listlessly. "Miss, please give me one more bowl. I have a 5-year-old girl at home. She's my granddaughter and she's just lost her parents, and she's currently terribly ill." "Okay." Xia Xiaosu did not say much as she immediately gave 2 bowls of congee to the old woman in front of her. "Thank you, miss." A man showed up next after the old woman left. He took out a bowl and said pitifully, "Miss, I filled up my stomach yesterday with soil from the river and I'm barely making it. Can you give me a little more?" "Okay." Xia Xiaosu scooped a big bowl of congee for him. After the men left, another woman in tattered clothes came to her with 2 children clutching onto her hand. She lifted her head and fixed Xia Xiaosu with a piteous gaze. Seeing these expressions one after another, Xia Xiaosu's heart went out to all these poor people. She sniffled a little but did not cry. Instead, she served them congee and forced a gentle smile onto her face. "There will be congee every day. I'll be here again tomorrow." "Thank you, miss." Xia Xiaosu stared at the long, gray line and her eyes suddenly went red. When another palace maid saw her condition, she hurried over to take over her shift, whispering, "Imperial Princess, you should take a rest first." Xia Xiaosu shook her head. She persistently gripped the ladle as she scooped up more congee for the people. When the reserves ran dry, she did not say, "That's all the congee for today. Come back again tomorrow." Instead, she consoled the refugees while instructing the palace maid to return to the palace and make more congee. There was no food for the hungry and no medicine for the sick. The homeless had nowhere to go and the dead on the street had no one asking after them. The imperial princess turned away and could not help wiping her tears away with her sleeves. That night, in the palace, brother and sister sat at the long table. There was only a simple meal of congee placed on the table. Xia Ji asked, "Why were you crying during the day?" "Xia Xiaosu, I felt sorry for them." She put her chopsticks down. It was only in front of her older brother when she would allow herself to express her emotions freely. Her eyes went red as she covered her face with her hands. She said softly, "The war destroyed everything they had. They lost contact with family and have even lost loved ones to death. I can see many corpses and bones while walking on the streets of the imperial capital. I can hear many people choking from the pain. Even the sound of the wind is filled with the cries of numerous pitiful souls. I feel so sad for them. They have never done anything wrong and have all worked hard in their own villages and homes, working hard while planting crops. Why? Why do they deserve such treatment?" Xia Ji replied, "This is destiny." Destiny. The imperial princess picked up her chopsticks. She was stunned for quite a long time. She wanted to say something, but instead, sighed deeply and lowered her head. If not for her older brother, she would have been brought to the south to wait for springtime, when she would be married off to Tujue. If not for her older brother, she would have pulled out the dagger at the top of the city walls and stabbed it through her heart. This was destiny. She had no right to question it. It was because she too was suppressed by destiny. That was why Xia Xiaosu sighed heavily, but when she lifted her head, she saw her older brother smiling. Xia Ji tousled her hair and told her, "Kindness begets kindness and evil begets evil. You have such a kind heart. You will definitely, have a good life." Xia Xiaosu asked dispiritedly, "Is that true?" Xia Ji smiled and said, "If not, how would you have an older brother like me?" Xia Xiaosu broke into a smile despite her tears. She nodded vigorously. "You're right. The heir apparent, 3rd Imperial Prince, 5th Imperial Prince, they couldn't hold a candle to you even if combined." Xia Ji quickly waved his hand dismissively. "Don't." Xia Xiaosu knew very well what he meant and she pouted. "Are you trying to say I'm poisonous milk again? Which part am I poisonous?" Xia Ji said, "Quick, sing the praises of the 3rd Imperial Prince. Just take a look at the 3rd Imperial Prince and Imperial Concubine Wan. She is a doting mother and he is a filial son." Xia Xiaosu gave him an exasperated look. "To be honest, I really do think the 3rd Imperial Prince is charming and dashing, has a cultured wit and is surrounded by intelligent people, dresses and dances well, and is admired by many scholars. As for imperial concubine Wan, she has quite the presence and stands out much more than the imperial empress. Xia Ji looked extremely sincere as he replied earnestly, "Thank you." Xia Ji opened the wooden box and removed the wooden beads as he continued carving the beads which were filled with spiritual strength. He was at lake watching. The night wind was icy cold, the lake looked mystically dark, and as he stood between the icy sky and snowy earth, no disruptive thoughts were able to intrude on his mind. He focused on his finger as he carved out one after another prayer bead with the gold on it. Every bead was a hidden trump card and he managed to carve another 10. He rubbed his forehead as exhaustion threatened to catch up to him. He breathed a sigh of relief. He slept until the next morning. He took out the remaining prayer beads after that and took the opportunity of his perky condition in the morning to complete his work in one go. He ended up stringing 108 prayer beads of karma. The number of 108 represented the different troubles faced by all living beings. All troubles would eventually lead to evil conduct. When praying with the beads, one's mind and soul would be cleansed. Naturally, one would be able to obliterate the 5 aggregates at that moment, as fabrications and falsehoods were emptied from the mind and soul. Of course, the most important factor was that the Buddhist instrument would become stronger in proportion with the beads' quantity. He felt a pang of hunger after he was done with the work. He looked out the window. He had no idea when the snow had stopped falling. The sun had already appeared in the sky and it was noontime. He had a simple meal and had just walked out the door when a guard came rushing toward him from afar. The guard knelt on one knee and said, "Reporting to your highness, people are congregating around the kanji stall on the street and are creating trouble. The situation is becoming more chaotic by the minute and the patrolling soldiers are unable to keep things under control." Creating trouble. Did anything happen to the 9th Imperial Princess? No, but the situation is currently getting serious. Xia Ji gathered the 100 soldiers of sacrifice and eunuch Mei, and they left the imperial palace together. The streets were in a state of helter-skelter. One could hear countless refugees curse out in anger from the distance. Take a look at this, everyone. This is the 9th Imperial Princess, Xia Xiaosu. There are mountains of grain kept within the imperial palace and all that is needed is just a fraction of it for everyone to be well fed and no one in the city would die of hunger. That's right. The people in the imperial palace are having extravagant feasts. Meanwhile, we are homeless and have lost our loved ones to the hands of death. A timid voice said, "I have to say, the imperial princess has always spoken gently. She has been kind to us as well. She's just trying to bribe the hearts of the people. Do you think the imperial emperor would bear to see us suffer such terrible tragedies if he was still in the imperial city?" Sigh. Stop being fooled by such petty kindness. We've received just a tiny portion of charity and they expect us to bear a debt of gratitude. Xia Xiaosu stood next to the kanji stall as the guards protected her. She did not try to explain herself, she was no fool. She knew these people were most probably working for someone. One may try to reason with others, but there was no way of ever convincing someone intent on creating trouble. Every explanation given and every pain expressed would only serve to give such individuals delight and satisfaction. That was why her expression looked slightly grim. The palace maids, on the other hand, were shouting, "It's not like that. There isn't much grain left in the palace. This is the time for everyone to work together and overcome this crisis." Liar. How is it possible that the imperial palace doesn't have much grain left? You're enjoying magnificent feasts every day. All you need is to give us a little of your grain and it could save us all. No one would die if you did that. Why are you treating us this way? Liar. Exactly, that's exactly right. Open up the granary and give us the grain. The group of people started to wave their hands about threateningly. Many of the refugees who were not aware of the truth had been influenced into joining the outcry from behind as well. There were even some from the group who threw stones to the front. Be careful, Imperial Princess. Some palace maids quickly tried to protect her. However, more and more stones and mud were thrown toward them. The remaining kanji had also been snatched completely during the commotion. Stones were continuously pelted from afar and the cursing continued. Xia Ji stood below a roof as he watched silently. A vicious look flashed in his eyes. Eunuch Mei, who was standing at his side, said quietly, "Your Highness, this is not a suitable time for execution. All that is needed is to chase off the few who are taking the lead in this ruckus. The people's sentiments are antagonistic right now. If you kill one of them, it would be equivalent to throwing a spark into a pot of oil. The consequences would be unthinkable." Xia Ji shot him a look. "Are you trying to teach me what to do?" Eunuch Mei immediately replied, "I would not dare." Xia Ji looked afar. The 9th Imperial Princess lowered her head insecurely. Her eyes were puffy as peaches from all the crying. She had been quietly crying for the past few days, and now, the cursing and scolding came to her in waves. Every voice was like a sharp knife stabbing into her heart. Kindness begets kindness and evil begets evil. His imperial sister was a kind person whose tears flowed for those in pain and suffering. She had quietly pretended to be a palace maid to give out kanji without asking for fame, but someone had used her to create a ruckus. Why did she deserve this? Loathing. Loathing for destiny and the unfairness of life. Loathing for kindness and evil not getting the karma they deserved. I have been too soft-hearted. Xia Ji gently muttered a sentence. He closed his eyes tight as the aura around him turned dark. There used to be a splash of light there, but now, that spark had completely vanished. Slam. A stone flew across the crowd and hit Xia Xiaosu heavily on the shoulder. She cried out in pain. Xia Ji's eyes flew open. All it took was one thought, and one would either be Buddha or the devil. All he wanted to do now was laugh maniacally. He had never thought that after 2 years of imprisonment and numerous times of being bullied and suppressed, he would still have the ridiculous sense of mercy in his heart. He looked into the distance and said with the calmest tone, "Kill them all." Chapter 29. Aren't you afraid of ending up in tongue-pulling hell? Eunuch Mei gasped in shock, "Your Highness, you can't. This will cause terrible chaos." The people's sentiment. There was a vague change in Xia Ji's expression, but very quickly, it turned into a smile as he said, "Are you trying to teach me what to do again?" Eunuch Mei was stunned and he quickly knelt down and said repeatedly, I do not dare do so." The 100 soldiers of sacrifice stepped forward to complete their duty without hesitation because of the token in Xia Ji's hand. They pulled out their swords with stoic expressions and walked toward the crowd. Xia Ji added to his instructions, "Capture the leaders alive and grant them death by dismemberment. Cut them 1,000 times with your swords, and not one cut less or you will make up for it on yourselves." An ominous look flashed across the eyes of the soldiers of sacrifice. "Yes, master." The commotion from the other side had quickly garnered the attention of these mobsters. They had no idea of the imminent danger about to befall them. Under the current circumstances, anyone with the slightest understanding of tactics would know better to conduct an execution. This would cause a massive loss of support from the people and add fuel to the fire. With that in mind, someone from the crowd voiced out with malicious intent, "His Highness is blessed by Buddha and has saved the imperial capital. Please do not abandon your people while..." Before he could finish his sentence, a soldier of sacrifice appeared in front of him and grabbed his face by the cheeks. The man's tongue was pulled out and immediately cut off. His master had instructed for 1,000 cuts from the sword. This was just the first cut. The unexpected scene stunned the people. Some of the instigators remained hidden with the crowd as they continued to shout, "His Highness has gone mad. He's killing all of us, the innocent commoners. Xia Ji has stepped onto the demonic path. He does not care for our lives. Xia Ji is a cruel tyrant. He no longer has the blessing of Buddha. It's him, he is the one who refuses to open up the granary and relieve us." Those who had uttered the words could not hide no matter what they did. They were quickly discovered by the soldiers of sacrifice. Their tongues were cut off and they were then immobilized by strikes to the pressure points. The only pressure point that was not applied was the mute point. They were then promptly taken to the head of the bridge not far off and executed via dismemberment. Some of the refugees had been looking forward to a riot. That would have given them the opportunity to reap some benefits during the chaos. However, under the watchful eyes of the 7th Imperial Prince of the Shang dynasty, no one dared do anything. The wailing of agonizing regret could be heard from the bridge behind him. It was so intense, it chilled the heart of anyone who heard it. Following that, the other troublemakers' bravado dipped to a minimum as they quickly vacated the area. The imperial princess walked toward Xiaoji's side with her hands lowered dejectedly. She had been crying so hard that her eyes were puffy. Xiaoji gently touched her long hair, which was soft and fine, and wiped away her tears with the back of this hand. Xiaoxiaosu sobbed, "Big brother, I'm sorry. I'm the one who brought you all this trouble." A gentle smile appeared on Xiaoji's face. "You're not the one at fault. Just don't come out here all by yourself the next time. Let the palace maids set up the kanji stalls. You should stay in the palace and read more books." As they were conversing, the sound of fighting could be heard coming from the bridge where the execution had been carried out. A cold look appeared on Xiaoji's face as he patted the imperial princess on the shoulder. "Follow me." Xiaoxiaosu quickly followed behind the steps of her older brother. The few guards with them did not dare to follow as they busied themselves picking up the pieces of the riot. Xiaoxiaosu's gaze swept across the people on the street. Most of the refugees did not actually join in the earlier brawl. They looked quite pitiful as they huddled by the side, not knowing what to do. Her heart softened once again as she shouted, "We'll be back in the evening. There's still kanji available." This time, there was no one saying anything along the lines of her being a hypocrite. Many of the refugees could not help lifting their eyes. The dull look in their eyes brightened as joy shone through them. Some of the children were even smiling at Xiaoxiaosu. However, they quickly lowered their head in fear when they saw Xiaoji. They walked toward the street and turned to a corner before stopping. Xiaoji looked at the fight that was happening on the bridge. Many of the soldiers of sacrifice were surrounding a monk. The soldiers of sacrifice were good with their weapons and were quite accomplished with their sword skills. Each slash of the sword was ruthless, but that monk deflected each attack effortlessly. The monk's staff acted as a go-between during the attacks and the soldiers of sacrifice eventually all fell into the water. The monk looked at those soldiers of sacrifice still carrying out the torments and suddenly said a prayer of Amitabha out loud. His voice sounded normal when it fell into the ears of those around, but many of the soldiers of sacrifice suddenly had a pained look on their faces and next, blood started flowing out of their ears. "I am the monk Sorrowful Divine. How could all of you treat innocent people this way? Stop what you are doing now." However, the soldiers of sacrifice refused to heed the word of the monk. They were soldiers of sacrifice. They had to complete their duty given by Xiaoji. However, a commotion erupted from all directions when the monk announced his name. "It's Sorrowful Divine Monk from Lane Temple. The Divine Monk is merciful. He must be here in the imperial capital to save everyone from the pits of misery. Master Sorrowful." Many of the people had looks of hope on their faces. Sorrowful held onto his black monk staff as he stood at the head of the bridge. There was neither happiness nor sorrow in his eyes as his gaze swept across the soldiers of sacrifice who had not stopped what they were doing. He suddenly said angrily, "Buddha might be filled with mercy, but he also possesses the rage of Buddha's warrior attendants and is relentless, prepare to." When he said this, he lifted his monk staff with sudden force as the aura around him started to expand. When he said the words, "prepare to," his voice thundered. He was clearly about to initiate an attack mode of the sound category. Before he could go into the attack mode, Xiaoji was already standing beneath the bridge, asking, "Prepare to do what?" Sorrowful recognized who this was. He gave a gesture of courtesy with one hand and greeted, "Seventh Imperial Prince." Xiaoji paused in his steps. The two men were 10 feet apart. He returned the greeting, "Master Sorrowful." Sorrowful said, "Your Highness, you had a game of chess with my senior on Mount Meru, obtaining a breakthrough in Pearl in the Sea. This signifies your Highness's fate with Buddha. Why not sever your 3,000 thread of worries, Tn, in Buddhist terms, 3,000 threads refer to one's hair, which represents worries in life, and follow the path of Buddhism." Xiaoji asked, "What would happen to my loved ones then?" Sorrowful replied, "Be a monk and you would no longer have a home." Xiaoji continued, "What about my blood feud?" Sorrowful replied, "Nothing is permanent. Men will experience life, death, change, and annihilation. The blood feud mentioned by your Highness is just an earlier entry into reincarnation." Xiaoji pressed, "Why are you here then?" Sorrowful said, "To save people. These commoners may have taken liberties with their tongues, but they are innocent, after all. They have suffered enough punishment, which is why I'm here to save them. Your Highness may be fated with Buddha, but you are also trapped by your attachment to the world. I am here to advise your highness not to take the path of the demon. I am also here to save your highness. Xia Ji said, when Guifang conducted their siege, where were you? When Guifang retreated and dead bodies and hungry people littered the city, where were you? All I've done was capture a few mobsters instigated by some scheming mastermind, and here you are, claiming to save them, and to save me. What right do you have? Sorrowful was not angered. He chanted his Buddhist name and said calmly, Your Highness has been blessed by Buddha, defeating Guifang alongside the soldiers and generals guarding the city. This is a deed of merit. If you insist on the killing of a few commoners whose guilt is not worthy of death punishment, it would be equivalent to entering the demonic path. Is that worth it? Xia Ji rebutted with a question. Men will experience life, death, change, and annihilation, so what's the point of saving a few mobsters such as these? Sorrowful replied, monks are people of compassion and mercy, of course they would need saving. Xia Ji persisted, if you want to save people, you would need to hurt others in the process. Sorrowful said, those who hurt others with vicious and cruel tactics would be walking the demonic path. If I walk that path, I won't be hurting others. What would you be then? I'll be cleansing them of their sins. Xia Ji could not help laughing aloud at those words. He said sarcastically, Master Sorrowful is indeed a divine monk. You spout nothing but rubbish. Any more words from you would just be laughable and filled with hypocrisy. You make irresponsible remarks and your words are filled with deception. Aren't you afraid of ending up in tongue-pulling hell? Sorrowful sighed softly. Your Highness, are you intent on going through with this and entering the demonic path? Xia Ji was not angry about his words. He looked about at heaven and earth, suddenly saying, Master, take a look at this lake in the imperial capital. Why does the water reflect so many different things? Sorrowful turned his head to look and replied, because there are trees at the lakeside, the clouds in the sky, the boats on the lake, the bridge on the water. The projection of all within heaven and earth falls within the lake water, and naturally, reflection appears. Xia Ji said, Master, since you are aware of this, where does the reflection of the demonic path, turning demonic, vicious and cruel tactics, and relentlessness that you are constantly mentioning, come from? Sorrowful was taken aback and could not answer. Chapter 30. You really do mean nothing to me. For a moment, Sorrowful was truly dumbfounded. He chanted Amitabha and changed the topic. If your highness insists on being willful and stubborn, the only thing left for me to do is take you back to the mountains for a retreat so you can reflect on yourself. He took out a string of prayer beads from his pockets as he said this. His left hand held the prayer beads to his front as he moved the beads about one by one. Your Highness is powerfully skilled in martial arts and is a genius not of this world, but do you know that there is a valuable item in this world called a Buddhist instrument? The power of a Buddhist instrument is extremely immense. Even one with invincible martial arts skills might not be able to deflect it. The prayer beads in my hand is a Buddhist instrument left behind by little Tathagata, the abbot of Layin Temple from back in the day. Even though quite some time has passed and the instrument's divine ability has diminished somewhat, it is still quite capable of capturing your highness. Xia Ji noted that the monk had not answered his question and was instead holding the 33 prayer beads as a Buddhist instrument in his hand. Xia Ji asked calmly, do you fear nothing just because you have something in your hand? It depends on what is being held. If what is in my hand is a Buddhist instrument of Buddha's warrior attendant that was used to face evil demons and heretics, naturally, there will be nothing to fear. A suppressed look of glee flashed in Sorrowful's eyes. Sorrowful, what sort of meditation have you been cultivating? Sorrowful ignored this and said, let me ask you again. Are you still unrepentant? Xia Ji snorted. The reputation of the divine monk does not match up to the real thing at all. It looks like this is the end of Layin Temple. Save for a few shades of mysteries and a handful of Buddhist instruments, there is nothing left to be passed on. Sorrowful immediately interrupted him when he heard this and sneered, don't blame me for taking action. He stopped talking after that and his eyes flew wide open. The eyes were the place where one's spirituality gathered. His eyes, which had been devoid of sorrow or delight, immediately turned to display extreme sorrow and great delight, and a vague glow could even be spotted within them. His spirituality had escalated to its peak as he swung his left hand. The 33 prayer beads vanished without a trace as a small bright, golden glow appeared in the middle of his palm. Zen encircled him as a bright flammule burst out. Sorrowful thrust his palm forward and roared a loud ha. The golden light in his palm grew and blossomed quickly at a speed that was subsequently detectable by the common man's visual and senses. With a wave of thought, a golden formed. The spun at amazing speed. It sliced through 10 feet of space. Before the Shang dynasty's 7th imperial prince realized what had happened, the had already fallen upon him. The moment it got into contact with his physical body, it transformed into a blinding, gold light and entered his body. Then, a layer of gold light appeared under the skin of Xia Ji as it bound him up tightly. The rage on Sorrowful's face disappeared as he smiled. Amitba. Even if your highness is able to defeat Guifang, at the very end, you are still unable to escape from the binds of a Buddhist instrument with a mortal's body. Come with me. Xia Ji did not move, but suddenly chanted out loud, all that is immaterial are material, yet all that is material are immaterial, all possessions are about control, yet all have no control. He finished this sentence. The Shang dynasty's 7th imperial prince effortlessly released himself from the golden light that had been binding him. He was now holding onto the 33 beads in his hand. He looked at the dumbfounded Sorrowful and said casually, these beads bind obstacles of the mind, not the people themselves. Since it is unable to bind me, it proves that there is no obstinate willfulness within me. I am wondering, however, if Master Sorrowful attempting to bind me with these beads, would you know if you have obstinate willfulness within yourself? Sorrowful replied with a hesitant stutter, the prayer beads. Return them to me. Xia Ji laughed softly as he did as Sorrowful asked. He threw the now very dull-looking 33 prayer beads back toward the monk a distance away. The divine monk quickly grabbed them in his arms. When he next raised his head, the imperial prince opposite him had taken out a string of 108 prayer beads from his pockets. Sorrowful. Xia Ji wrapped the prayer beads around his left hand. The gods were silent as the great earth's zenness bonded onto the prayer beads. The beads vanished in an instant. They turned into a golden light so blindingly bright that one was unable to look at it directly. His left hand pushed out slowly. The golden light expanded explosively but did not form a. Instead, it transformed into a gigantic golden Buddha's hand that imitated every move made by his palm. The Buddha's palm hung high above the head of Sorrowful as it covered the entire bridge. It had a length of 10 feet. There was a pause. Xia Ji asked calmly, are monks willfully obstinate beings? Sorrowful looked at the Buddha's hand with disbelief and fell into silence. Before he was able to answer, the gigantic, golden Buddha's hand fell down. The gigantic Buddha's hand came crashing onto him. It shadowed the entire bridge and covered the sides of the lake. However, there was something strange about this. There was no ripple of water. The bridge was not affected. None of the objects around shifted from its touch. Only Sorrowful was struck. He was forced to the ground by the gigantic Buddha's hand. There was a look of pain and suffering on his face. Xia Ji asked softly, Sorrowful, what sort of meditation have you been cultivating? Sorrowful was trembling all over. He wanted to say something, but he was now in infernal hell. His body was suffering from the burning of a Visnaraka fiery flames and it was incinerating the many sins he had committed in the past. Xia Ji shook his head. Sorrowful. If it was anyone else here today, he would be defeated by me as well. As for you, you really do mean nothing to me. He turned away after saying this and did not take another look at the divine monk. The golden Buddha's hand evaporated at this point as it returned to the hands of the imperial prince when he made a grabbing gesture. The 108 prayer beads wrapped around his wrist once again as his left thumb quietly shuffled the beads across his hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. When he had gotten to 108, he had also seen through the worries and obstinate willfulness of all living beings. Even if he was unable to sever them, he was able to see them clearly. Although the divine monk was flooded with worries of his own, he was under the impression that he was superior to others and insisted on getting others to overcome the burdens of their minds. Behind him, Sorrowful's figure was silent and unmoving. He had thrown himself on his knees facing the direction of the Shang dynasty's imperial prince. Xia Ji glanced at the soldiers of sacrifice carrying out the sentence of death by dismemberment. Continue. When you're done, remember to confiscate the prayer beads and staff of the monk." With that, he returned to the side of the imperial princess. They did not take the carriage but walked toward the direction of the imperial palaces. They took the bridge. Some of the commoners had moved forward with curiosity and approached the divine monk who had thrown himself on the ground. They called out tentatively, "Master Sorrowful." There was no answer. "Master." There was still no answer. The divine monk maintained his position on the ground, as if transformed into a statue. The commoners calling out to him reached out gently to touch him. The touch seemed to have upset some sort of unseen balance. The monk Sorrowful's physical body broke into pieces as it disintegrated into dust that formed his physical shape. A gust of wind blew from the lake and the dust forming from his head to his toe disappeared with the wind. When both royalties returned to the palace, the book Xiaji had ordered the guards to move from the evacuated nobles' houses had arrived. These books filled up his original library loft, and as for the other local renowned families who have yet to leave the city, Xiaji had sent them requests for a visit in advance, stating his wish to survey the book collection of the families. It was not too long before he received a reply from these families, who all welcomed his visit. Reading did not involve any conflict of interest. Even if these renowned families had other intentions, they would not offend Xiaji over such a trivial matter. The books were relocated into the palace via carriage in hordes and later categorized to plump up the library loft. During the morning, the faint brilliance of sunlight was quickly extinguished as several days of sunshine was finally disrupted by blazing snow. The doors of the imperial library loft were opened. Xiaji looked at the library loft filled to the brim and gave the imperial princess next to him a glance. The imperial princess was looking grimly at the ground covered in white, and watched as the dancing snow eventually became a raging snowstorm. She sighed gently. Xiaji said, "From this day onward, you will stay here to study these books. Don't leave the palace anymore." Xia Xiaosu nodded. "Okay, big brother." Xiaji made a pot of hot tea and placed it in front of the wooden window. A wisp of hot smoke billowed from the pot like a white snake. Outside the window, the ground was flooded with a thick layer of white, billowing snow. If the snowing did not cease, the entire imperial capital will turn snow-white at night time and transform into a world buried in a sea of snow. Chapter 31. Destroying your Zen with one sentence. Xiaji turned to look at his little sister. The imperial princess was reading aloud in a soft voice from a book in her hand. A man may achieve success by keeping a tight lip, exposed words lead to failure. One who is unable to relinquish their ego and open their mouths, revealing what should be kept undisclosed, would place themselves in danger. When subtle signs have shown that something has happened because of the man's doing, he might not be aware of what he had caused by his exposed words, but he is surely aware of what he has done, and thus he is placed in danger. Xiaji recognized the lines. It was the opening of the Path to Power. It was written from the viewpoint of an official who was describing the dangers of working at the side of the emperor. The contents were mindfully detailed and contained complex strategies. To utilize power, one must first understand the challenges that come with it. It was now impossible to find out the author of this book, but it should have been written by a well-known writer from ancient times and passed down to this generation. It was also the sole remaining copy of the book that could only be found in the palace. After all, research and studies on the art of stratagem were not for commoners. Unfortunately, such a book was only able to give Xiaji a blue skill bead. It could have been because of the book's limitations on focusing solely on the art of stratagem that made it fall short. Xia Xiaosu focused on her reading, giving it her full concentration and filtering out all distracting thoughts. It was clear that there was a slight shift in her state of mind, and Xiaji gave a sigh of relief, consoled by her efforts. He did not disturb the 9th imperial princess and went about his business as he approached a bookcase that was further away. He pulled out the first book in front of him and started reading it aloud. The imperial capital was left in a mess amidst the snowstorm. It was going through turbulent times and there was a huge storm brewing ahead. The enemy within was hidden and invisible, creating trouble from the dark using underhanded tactics, and they did not reveal themselves no matter the circumstances. However, the imperial prince and princess continued their morning reading in the archive chamber despite the turmoil beyond the doors, their voices calm as they read their books aloud. Xiaji was about to reach out for his third book after he was done with his first two when the sound of footsteps was suddenly heard from outside the door. He pushed the book, which was already halfway out, back to its place and turned to walk toward the door. He opened the door quietly. Xia Xiaosu was especially focused on the book she was reading. She was so engrossed that Xia Ji's movement did not distract her at all. Outside the room, the guard knelt on one knee in the snow when he saw the imperial prince appear at the door. He said loudly, reporting. He had only just opened his mouth when Xia Ji immediately raised his hand, gesturing for the guard to stop. He pointed toward the courtyard. The guard understood what he meant and stood up with his head bowed as he walked toward the courtyard. Xia Ji followed behind him. Xia Ji did not want to interrupt Xiaosu studying, much like the time since 2 years ago when the 9th imperial princess often stood outside the door holding his box of food, waiting for him to finish reading before pretending to walk in as if she had just arrived. The snow was falling in the courtyard. The guard knelt once more at the archway as he reporting to Your Highness, Lane Temple has sent a monk to request for sorrowful divine monk's prayer beads, monk's staff and saraira. Xia Ji hesitated a moment before asking, where are the prayer beads, monk's staff, and saraira? The guard replied, Eunuch Mei has collected them and placed them in the imperial armory. Xia Ji said, retrieve them and bring the monk from Lane Temple to see me. Yes, Your Highness. A moment later. Sorrowful's prayer beads, monk's staff, and saraira were placed grandly on a splendid-looking long plate, which now sat under the roof of the archive chamber. A smiling monk dressed in a kasaya followed behind the guard as they walked over from afar. The guard stood at the door as the smiling monk thanked him and entered the doorway. He saw the young prince sitting cross-legged in the room, holding a cup of tea in his left hand as he sipped it. The smiling monk said, I am Wenkong, here to see the 7th imperial prince. Xia Ji asked, why are you here, monk? Wenkong replied, I'm here for the prayer beads, monk's staff, and saraira. Xia Ji asked, do monks have an insistence on matters too? Wenkong answered, monks need to live in this world as well, naturally, there will be an insistence for certain matters. These 3 objects originally belonged to Lane Temple and I hope Your Highness would be willing to return them to us. Xia Ji said bluntly, none of you were around when Guifang attacked the city, so why did you choose to appear when chaos descended upon the imperial capital? Wenkong said, my senior has always been a recluse with no fixed abode. He has not returned to the temple for a long time. What he has done has nothing to do with Lane Temple. Xia Ji said, monks do not spread falsehood. Are you still able to maintain your meditative mind while spouting such words? Wenkong replied calmly, I did not spread any falsehood, therefore my meditative mind is still intact. Xia Ji said, have you seen your own heart, monk? Wenkong shook his head. Xia Ji asked, if you haven't seen it, how do you know your meditative mind is intact? Wenkong replied with a question, has Your Highness seen it? Xia Ji said, I have. Not only have I seen it, but I can even draw it for you, monk. Wenkong was taken aback, but he quickly smiled and shook his head. His Highness might have studied the scriptures wholeheartedly for more than 2 years and he had overcome his sea of misery with his meditative mind, but matters of the heart were illusory and unfathomable. How was he able to draw it? The meditative mind is an extremely mysterious thing. One might plunge into deep thought yet never be able to achieve it, yet would attain enlightenment by suddenly looking back at things. Hard work and progress would land you nowhere, yet a simple step forward may grant you a meditative mind. How would one draw such an occurrence? When Xia Ji noticed the monk's disregard, he said, if I'm not able to draw your heart, I will return these 3 objects to you exactly the way they were. Wenkong had a smile on his face as he said, blessed be. Xia Ji said, if I do manage to draw it, what would you do? Wenkong said, what would Your Highness have me do? Xia Ji said, how many ancient books are hidden within Lane Temple? Wenkong said, our ancient books have been left with us since ancient times. Most have been lost. Your Highness has read the present Sakyamuni Sutra and the past Dipankara Sutra. The only book left is the Secret of Tathagata. Xia Ji said, let's exchange this book with the prayer beads, monk staff, and saraira. I'll return it to you after reading it in 3 days. Wenkong secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He had thought His Highness would have wanted to find out more about Sorrowful and what had led to the situation caused by him. It was something that Wenkong was not too clear about, but the implications were major. He thought about the importance of the 3 objects, which included a Buddhist instrument. They must be returned. So, he said, the condition required for reading an ancient book is to overcome the pearl in the sea. Since your highness has already overcome it, I swear upon my meditative mind to negotiate with the abbot on your behalf for the book. Xia Ji finally nodded and waved him over. Come over here, monk. I will help draw your heart. The smiling monk walked toward the Shang dynasty's 7th imperial prince with some curiosity. Xia Ji poured himself a cup of tea. It was already cold. However, his left hand held onto the cup gently, and the high temperature generated by the inner vitality of the 9 suns almost immediately boiled the tea as steam appeared from it. There was a vague sound of boiling water coming from it. The next moment, Xia Ji lifted his left hand and splashed the boiling hot tea into Wen Kong's face. Wen Kong was not prepared for this. All he felt was a burning sensation between his eyes and pain in his eyes. The smile on his face vanished as he raged, "What are you doing?" Xia Ji did not reply. He dipped his right hand into some tea and silently immersed it with some spirituality of dhyana and meditative mind. He moved his hand casually about on the table and soon drew the face of the furious monk. The 7th imperial prince of the Shang dynasty stood up quietly and left with his hand behind his back. A voice could be heard from afar, "This is your heart. Do you think your meditative mind is still intact?" Wen Kong looked at the face on the table. It was furious and savage, the sight leaving him stunned and tongue-tied. The next moment saw him suddenly going red in the face and ears as he knelt in the snow. His meditative mind was compromised as he recalled the accusing words of the Shang dynasty's 7th imperial prince, "Monks do not spread falsehood." Are you still able to maintain your meditative mind while spouting such words? He looked again at the bestial face on the table. Wen Kong's mind and soul were swayed and he was suddenly no longer able to get a hold of himself. He fell forward and spat out a mouthful of blood. His meditative mind was shattered. Chapter 32. This Xia Ji is a reckless man. At that moment, in a huge mansion within the imperial capital. It was an environment different from that of frozen bodies buried under snow all over the city, starved corpses under the bridge next to the flowing river. In this place, delicacies were piled up high as mountains while fragrant wine flowed freely like rivers. Between the mountain and river, officials and noblemen gathered, dressed in splendor. They chatted jovially as if the disaster happening outside of the mansion had nothing to do with them. A dignified-looking man was in the main seat. He had a calm and mature temperament about him, and a slightly cheeky yet intelligent look in his eyes. It made him look especially sharp and astute. One look at him and anyone would say to themselves quietly that, this is a shrewd man and one cannot afford to cheat him. The aura encompassing the man was forged by a steely resolution about him that had been accumulated from years of experience. There was also a sharp shred of intelligence contained within. Even though he was seated, he still gave an impression of being someone of great importance. This man was the great scholar, He Fengwen. He had stayed behind not because he was abandoned, but because he was given the same duty as the steward, which was to ensure that the imperial prince would die in battle and he himself would later leave via the east gates with the secret order alongside his trusted aides. The great scholar was enjoying the fine wine. It tasted sweet and mellow. The amber-like liquid reminded one of a dancing beauty in satin when swished about. It was intoxicating and infatuating, and one could not help but bring one's lips toward it. Unfortunately, the duty was not done and the event was missing the company of real-life beauties. It was a somewhat disappointing event. He looked around. Even though his colleagues were toasting each other, the lack of the fragrant and aesthetically pleasing beauties truly put a damper on the gracefulness and enthusiasm of the event. He Fengwen lifted his cup. Come, let me give everyone a toast. All that were present lifted their cups in return. They drained their cups in one. A man in grand clothes standing next to the great scholar suddenly sighed while rubbing his wrists. When will His Highness return to the imperial capital? It has been a long wait for all of us, his loyal officers. He Fengwen said, it should be soon. This is all because of the 7th imperial prince. The 7th imperial prince is nothing more than the least favored imperial prince. I say that he should have died this time. If an emperor wants an officer to die, that person must accept his death. Moreover, his relationship with His Highness is not just a master and servant, but father and son. His Highness wanted him to have a good death here and be a filial son and loyal officer, yet he chooses to be neither filial nor loyal, ho ho. If the seventh imperial prince had died on the city walls, he would have received acclamation upon death, which is his post of Grand Marshal of the world. The imperial family personally appearing at the front line and dying in battle would give birth to a hero who ignites a fiery rage within the Shang dynasty and create a plausible cause for the imperial emperor to restructure the entire land when spring arrives. But the seventh imperial prince refused to be this hero. This is quite unfortunate and disappointing. From my observation, this son of the imperial emperor was born with great patience and is extremely gifted. Somewhere along the way, he had cultivated such powerful abilities and was even able to defeat the frost giants on his own and turn the tables in this crisis. Oh, so Master One, you think that the imperial capital was protected because of the sole contribution of Xia Ji? Do you think that the 50,000 elite soldiers guarding the imperial capital and the many commoners are nothing but decorations? This Xia Ji is a reckless man. Who is he showing off to with his patience? What is his reason for such tolerance? What is he planning with the vast imperial land of the Shang dynasty? Does he really think that he is bearing the destiny given by the heavens and believes that he is the center of the world? Everyone has their destiny. And his destiny was to die at the imperial capital, to die on the city walls and create a potential push for the coming year. He has gone against the heavens and does not know what is good for him. He is a man with no regard for his master or his father. Master Bai is right. This man is neither loyal nor filial and has gone against heaven's wishes. He has no idea what he is doing and the minor ability that he has cultivated has gone to his head. He thinks he is invincible just because he had a few exceptional encounters. The truth is that he is nothing but a jester who is performing his antics. If I was in his shoes, I'd just allow the rioters to continue their instigation and do nothing more than pacify them. I wouldn't execute the rioters so blatantly at this time. Or, I would send people to blend into the group of refugees to shout positive words on his behalf. Doesn't he have a brain? Does he think that so many rioters did all those things without us controlling them behind the scenes? And to think that I've even planned various backups, waiting for him to try and pacify the masses by sending his people to blend into the refugee groups. Who would have thought that these backups did not come into play at all? His stupidity is laughable. It's pathetic, yet sad. Ha 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 ha. There have been many people like him since the ancient times. Look what happened to them in the end. They ended up with horrible deaths. This is all there is to the imperial prince. There is no difference between him and those reckless fools who had died in the past. Everyone, there is no need to overthink this. From my point of view, this imperial prince is lacking in the art of strategy. He has fallen into our trap. If we were to compare the people's will to a frying pan, his actions are just like adding fire into the pan. He has lost popularity among the people and he has nothing in the imperial palace. Aside from the 9th imperial princess who will be married off to Tujue in the next year, what other friends does he have? Do allow me to be blunt, if the imperial prince is planning to revolt, who will revolt alongside him? The mind of this imperial prince is absurdly simple. What he plans to do is to use the present time to convince officers to side with him. For example, that General Deng. Ho ho, laughable. It's just too laughable. Everyone, if not for the imperial prince, the entire imperial city, and even the refugees coming from the west, would have suffered a great calamity. There would have been countless casualties. After all, he did manage to guard the doors of the nation. TSK, Master One is, after all, a new member of the nobility. The Shang dynasty possesses vast territory and has tens of billions of people. So what if a few million of them die? As long as the basis of the nation's foundation remains untouched, overcoming the crisis would simple. Master One, do not forget that this world belongs to only one, the one who is determined by fate and destiny. Everything in life has its place and if one insists on going against heaven's orders, it would bring about an even greater calamity. I understand. Everyone toasted each other once again. It was only now that Hefengwen laughed and said, "The 7th imperial prince is much too foolish." Sorrowful divine monk from Lane Temple noticed he was fated with Buddhism and came down from the mountains to point him in the right direction by attempting to convince him to give up the materialistic world and become a monk. Instead, he killed sorrowful divine monk. He brought this sin upon himself and should not be left alive. However, we still need to be careful. Pass down this message in gradual waves and slowly make the people of the imperial capital stand against him. Great scholar, when would His Highness be able to? Hefengwen smiled and said, "Do be patient, everyone. We should focus on solving the current situation. His Highness will be doing everything in his power to get those of caliber from various sides to stand by him when he returns from the south to take his rightful place in the capital. He is widely inviting hidden great scholars who are looking to accomplish great things. Rumor has it that he has managed to snag one to his side. Besides that, the vanguard used by His Highness to stabilize the imperial capital should be arriving soon. Great scholar, I have something I need to inform you." "Master Bai, it's fine. We are surrounded by trustworthy people. You may speak freely. The reckless Xia Ji has actually sent eunuch Mei to secretly investigate us. Unfortunately, his lead had been broken by my subordinate's subordinate. However, what intrigued me is that eunuch Mei, whom Xia Ji thinks can be trusted, has actually hinted at his willingness to join our side. To think that even the trusted aide of this reckless man does not have confidence in the success of his master. What's even more hilarious is that this reckless man is still reveling in delight. What a joke. Master Bai, do not be rash about this or take it lightly. We have yet to ascertain what is fake and what is true. Although, eunuch Mei was originally serving under the subordinate of His Highness and his right arm had been destroyed by the 7th Imperial Prince. It would be utter nonsense to claim that there is no hatred buried in his heart. He must have submitted himself to the 7th Imperial Prince because he was shocked by the prince's tactics and had the idea of wanting to give his fate of servitude an upgrade, but when he witnessed the 7th Imperial Prince's forceful actions, it scared him. That is why his offer to stand on our side might not necessarily be fake. Scholar, he stroked his beard as his sharp and intelligent eyes turned about before finally smiling and saying, "Don't reject him first. Let's just get him to spy on the 7th Imperial Prince, but be careful not to let the prince catch wind of you through this. Great scholar, do not underestimate me. I may repeatedly say that Xia Ji is a reckless man. But I have never underestimated anyone when taking action, especially when it comes to this Imperial Prince, who has great forbearance, defeated Guifang, and is a powerhouse who possesses great and legendary powers. It is even more important for me not to underestimate him." "That's good. Don't reveal your face and don't let anyone suspect you. When it is needed, you may even pretend to offer him help. I am an expert when it comes to this. When it comes to physical power, 1,000 of me would never be his match, but when it comes to tactics, ha ha ha." Everyone looked at each other as they burst into laughter. The snow flew about boundlessly and it finally buried the entire imperial capital deep in the night. The snow had been cleared, but built up again, and then cleared again. In the end, the snow's thickness continued to build up past the height of one's ankles. Xia Ji lit an oil lamp. The 9th Imperial Princess was still reading a book under the lamp's light. A dragon is considered a species of bug that is able to be domesticated and ridden. However, there are inverted scales underneath its throat which are several feet. Anyone who crosses it would be killed by it. Xia Ji glanced at her. Only tenderness could be seen in his eyes as he sat under the snow-ridden roof. Since the books here were only able to provide him with white and green skill beads, creating divine weapons would obviously be a more beneficial way to spend his time. He quietly carved prayer beads. He needed more. It was because the power of his Buddhist instrument was closely connected with quantity. If 108 of them were able to form a golden Buddhist palm of 10 feet, then what would form if he had 1,080 Buddhist prayer beads? He carved until exhaustion crept up to him and he gave a relaxed sigh as he turned to look at the direction of lake watching. The empty bait had been left out for quite a while. Those strange fishes should be biting on the hook soon, right? If they were still not biting, he would give them a hand tomorrow. Chapter 33. I'll be heading to Lane Temple tomorrow morning. When Xia Xiaosu opened the door, her older brother was still carving his prayer beads. He was focused on this carving and both his hands were impeccably steady. Even though the drifting snow had flaked his hair with white, her older brother was still very focused on carving the prayer beads. When each bead was done, he would pile them tidily into the long, wooden box laid next to his hand. The imperial princess carefully closed the door as her long legs moved forward slowly, wary of disturbing her older brother. She tiptoed in her fuzzy deerskin boots and grabbed the oiled paper umbrella lying against the corner of the wall. She was not in a hurry to open it. She walked down the steps slowly and carefully, stepping into the thick snow. She walked toward the courtyard outside of the archive chamber and opened the umbrella in one swift movement after exiting the courtyard entrance. White plums dotted the umbrella, which was adorned with branches drawn using ink paint. As snow swirled about in the air, the white plums floated away into the distance. They floated onto the earth, which was filled with enemies in every direction. The palace maids and eunuchs had prepared a dinner banquet quite early. With the absence of the imperial emperor, having hundreds of dishes was out of the question, but there were still dozens of dishes served. Xia Xiaosu took a look at the numerous delicious meat dishes served and said softly, "Next time, just prepare 2 dishes and 1 soup. My brother and I won't be able to finish this much food." With that, she selected 3 dishes and picked 2 bottles of fine wine, and said to the palace maid and eunuchs, "Share the remaining dishes among yourselves." The palace maids and eunuchs looked delighted. "Thank you, Imperial Princess." Xia Xiaosu returned to the archive chamber once more. Xia Ji had just sighed in relaxation when he raised his head to look at her. "Time to eat, big brother." The Imperial Princess was holding a basketful of food as she entered the room. Xia Ji gestured to the walkway below the roof. The walkway was a little more than 1 foot above the ground and was quite suitable to people watch and admire the falling snow. "Let's eat here." The Imperial Princess was taken aback. There were many rules when it came to having a meal with the Imperial family. Having a meal at the walkway was unheard of. Even the servants did not dare to do such a thing, as it would be considered rude and a lack of etiquette. However, so what if it was considered without etiquette? If it was not according to rules, then let it be. She had only hesitated for a second before replying, "Okay," obediently. With that, she placed the meal basket down onto the wooden walkway and took out a plate of beef with chestnut and crispy pepper, 8 treasures chicken fillet, and boneless leg of lamb in secret sauce. Next, she took out 2 bottles of fine wine without being sneaky about it. They were no longer being monitored and there was no need to sneak around with it. Xia Ji knew if his little sister wanted him to drink, she would bring only 1 bottle. If there were 2 bottles, it meant that she wanted to drink as well. Alas, Xia Xiaosu's alcohol tolerance could only be described as pathetic. She was someone who did not drink at all. She was drinking because she had believed in certain rumors. Xia Ji asked, "Because of this, are you trying to drown in your sorrows?" Xia Xiaosu replied, "I'm not exactly sure if it's considered sorrow. Are you feeling sympathetic to those innocent people in the imperial capital?" "That's right, I do feel sympathy for them, but I'm just a useless imperial princess who has no power over her own fate. There's nothing I can do. I'm nothing but a useless person." Xia Ji did not console her. All he did was say gently, "Then drink up." Xia Xiaosu did not say another word. She quickly poured herself some wine and gulped it down. She continued pouring wine for herself and downed cup after cup. The 3rd time she poured herself wine, she gulped it down as usual, looking especially valiant when in fact, her cheeks were already red as flames. She was a complete mess as the snowflakes in front of her eyes turned into a blur. Xia Ji could not help laughing. "What are you feeling sorrowful about?" "I'm not feeling sorrowful." Xia Xiaosu had already downed her 5th cup and a mist was beginning to form in front of her eyes. The influence of alcohol had made her more talkative than usual. "I've already made my decision. No matter what you do, I will stand by your side. If you die, I'll kill myself too." She patted her chest as she said this, and a shocking sound of metal could be heard. She dug about her front and took out a white shark-skin dagger and slammed it between them. "I won't die. If one day you hear a rumor of me being dead, don't ever believe it. You must make sure to see my body with your own eyes before killing yourself." Xia Ji ate the food and drank the wine as he watched the snowstorm unfold. The night was long, but not immensely so. Xia Xiaosu continued drinking rapidly. A silence fell between them that stretched on as the two sat listening to the snowstorm. Some wailing could be heard from afar, coming through the snowstorm from the imperial capital. Xia Ji suddenly asked, "Have you met those foxes again after returning the Maitreya Sutra?" "I did." Xia Xiaosu tried to recall the memory before continuing. "The day after the imperial family left the city, I actually bumped into them again. I returned the book to Hu Ling and she once again asked me to teach her some words. After I was done teaching, I did what you said and asked her, 'Miss Hu, what exactly do you want?' What did she say?" Hu Ling said that she wanted a Shang dynasty imperial family who was able to accept demons. Xia Ji said, How did you reply to her then? Xia Xiaosu answered, I said, as long as demons don't eat people or harm them, there is no reason not to accept them. After that, Miss Hu Ling urged me not to forget what I said. Xia Ji gave this some thought and tousled her long hair. In that case, you can no longer stay a little girl. Xia Xiaosu pouted, I've never been a little girl. She picked up her bottle of wine after saying this and gulped down the rest of it. She placed the bottle to her lips without an ounce of a princess-like demeanor and gurgled the remaining wine with relish. After she was done drinking, her body flopped to the side onto the wooden floor of the walkway, passing out in a hopelessly drunk state. She was a princess, yet she was not considered outstandingly elegant. She was not such a beauty that she was able to cause the downfall of cities, nor was she especially intelligent nor seductive. She was completely different from the second imperial princess, fourth imperial princess, and eighth imperial princess. If one were to say that she had grace, then it would be a grace mixed with a shred of misery that was not at all compatible with the imperial family. She did not have a big face and her skin was pale white. Her hair was very fine and slightly yellowish. She was not tall and was only about 1.5 meters. All her boots were custom made with internal elevation so as not to diminish the dignity of the imperial family. Fortunately for her, she had a well-proportioned body. She had fairly long legs and looked like a beauty who had been shrunk one size smaller. Her hair easily fell to her waist, and when the palace maids and eunuchs talked to her, they would do so while half kneeling to the ground or crouched down. Otherwise, they would be charged with the crime of looking down on the princess. Xia Ji looked at her little legs dangling in the air while her small face was flushed. Her eyes were red as well. He bent over to pick her up in his arms and the imperial princess nuzzled in his arms. The world was much too cold and there was nowhere warm she could go to. Xia Ji carried her and walked step by step toward her bedchamber. The snowstorm may be heavy, but he was practicing his Zen-ness fully at this point. The falling snow did not fall onto him, nor would it fall onto the imperial princess. He placed her onto the bed and took off her boots for her. He helped her out of her coat and gently covered her with a blanket. He left one candle lit for her as she would be scared if she woke up in the dark. He also prepared a cup of honey for her in case she woke up with a headache from the hangover and could not find water to consume. Xia Ji finally turned to leave after finishing that. Before he reached the door, a quiet sobbing came from the bed. He paused in his steps but did not turn back. All he did was close the doors quietly. He walked into the icy weather and onto the snowy ground as he returned to the archive chamber. He called for Eunuch Mei. Have you found the mastermind behind those mobsters? I have been incompetent. They are hidden too deeply and would rather commit suicide rather than reveal anything. Xia Ji nodded and did not pursue this topic. Instead, he said, I'll be going to Lane Temple at Mount Meru tomorrow morning to read books. I will require 3 days. You should continue with your investigation. Eunuch Mei replied in a manner much like before, where he was respectfully in awe and sincere. Chapter 34. I sat in the snow, smiling with a flower in my hand. In a mansion within the imperial capital. The great scholar fiddled with his beard, laughing as he said, Eunuch Mei came with news last night. The 7th imperial prince has indeed left through the east gates this morning in the direction of Lane Temple on Mount Meru. He would need 3 days for this trip. It looks like this imperial prince truly is friendless. Danger surrounds him and whatever path he takes has an ambush laid out for him. That's what he gets for coupling such quiet patience and huge ambitions. It is no surprise that those closest to him would turn their backs on him. This is a good opportunity for us to do something while he is away. The great scholar smiled. There is no need to, since he won't be coming back. After a thought, the great scholar added, even if he did return, the Imperial Emperor's vanguard general tasked with stabilizing the imperial city would have arrived by then. What can he do all on his own? Besides, there's still the 9th imperial princess. Even if he is able to slaughter his way out of here, it would be impossible for the 9th imperial princess to do the same, right? Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Doing nothing might be better than taking action, letting things loose might be better than tight control. Regardless, the end has been decided. Master He, you are indeed wise, ha ha ha. The snow was fluttering all about. Xia Ji brought along the items left behind by Sorrowful. He was wearing black casual clothes as he rode his horse and left the imperial city via the east gate, heading straight toward Mount Meru. By the time he had arrived at Lane Temple, it was close to noontime. He brushed off the snow that had draped his clothes and walked toward the fifth peak of Mount Meru. The doors of Lane Temple were closed and there currently were no believers at the temple. Xia Ji circulated his inner vitality to call out loudly. The Shang Dynasty's 7th Imperial Prince Xia Ji is here at the mountain as promised, come to read. The voice, filled to the brim with vigor, sliced through the falling snow and covered the entire Lane Temple before dissipating in echo all around it. His calling voice fell clearly upon the ears of every single monk in the temple. It was not long before the temple doors opened. 2 novice monks stood on each side. They shot unfriendly looks toward the 7th Imperial Prince. This prince had killed Sorrowful and destroyed Wen Kong's meditative mind. How could they possibly be cordial toward him? Xia Ji saw the door open and immediately took a step forward and entered the temple. The 2 novice monks rushed to close the doors behind him without delay. The door shut tight, cutting off the ties between the worlds within and beyond. Inside Lane Temple. The abbot was in his kasaya and he held onto his monk's staff. He was standing in front of the Sakyamuni valuable palace. Behind him was a huge, benevolent-looking golden Buddha, who was watching down at the young imperial prince who was walking in one step at a time. Amitabha, your highness has killed my senior, Sorrowful, and destroyed my junior, Wen Kong. Why would you still come here? I'm here because of the promise between me and Wen Kong. If I won, the temple would lend me the secret of Tathagata, but if I lost, I would return the monk's staff, prayer beads, and Saraira to him. He has lost, so I am here as promised. As for Sorrowful, he would never have died if he did not harbor great vileness within him. I was intending to ask your highness, where did you obtain your Buddhist instrument? What does it have anything to do with you? I heard that your highness used this Buddhist instrument to create the golden palm of Buddha. This golden palm of Buddha has been recorded in Lane Temple's books as a medium-caliber Buddhist instrument, but has been long lost. I'm just curious as to why your highness would have it. Are you looking to take it from me? Amitabha. If your highness is unwilling to say anything, I will not force you to. I had originally prepared to exchange the book with Senior Sorrowful's Buddhist instrument and Saraira. Since your highness is here, well then. Yuan Ji, take his highness to the archive chamber to read the secret book. The little novice monk immediately replied, yes, abbot. Your highness, please follow me. Xia Ji gave a wave of his hand and tossed Sorrowful's prayer beads, monk's staff, and Saraira over. The abbot caught them and replied with a curt blessed be. The little novice monk led the way as Xia Ji followed him deep into the temple. They passed through a set of doors. Then, 2 sets of doors. Snow floated about, making the air look fuzzy. It was not long before Xia Ji's black clothes were covered in white, but the inner vitality within him was filled to the brim and the white snow that had fallen on him slipped off on its own. After the 3rd set of doors, the little novice monk pointed to a little building afar and said, Your highness, that is where you need to go. Xia Ji lifted his head and saw the words, archive chamber, and nodded slightly. He pushed open the doors and entered the chamber, but the moment he walked in, he frowned immediately. There were many bookcases in the dark. Even if there was no source of light, he could tell one thing. There were no books on the bookcases, they were empty. However, the moment he stepped into the chamber, the floor started to shine. A gigantic, golden floated from the ground and his foot was stepping right in the middle of the symbol. This was huge. Each arm of the symbol was a few hundred meters long as it rotated gradually. It lit up the entire chamber, even shining onto the snowy grounds outside of the chamber. It turned the Lane Temple, situated on the 5th peak of Mount Meru, into a shining beacon. The bright rays of light broke into the arch of the night sky. At the same time, Xia Ji felt a strong binding sensation. Xia Ji lowered his eyes and saw a Sanskrit chain had appeared from the ground without him realizing it. It was now entwined on his body, rendering him immobile. I didn't come here uninvited. I am here because of a promise made. Is this the way Lane Temple treats its guests? Following his calm accusation, 9 burning suns appeared around Xia Ji. They spun until all 9 suns were hanging midair and then the 9 became one, forming a blazing flame of energy that could only have been created by 2 comets colliding. It circled about in different layers and shot out madly in all corners like a raging wind whistling about. Everything, including the bookcases, tables, and wooden pillars, was engulfed in this vast energy and were blown up into smithereens as the pieces scattered wildly into the distance. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom. The empty archive chamber had been completely obliterated by his energy amidst the booming sound of an explosion, and it collapsed into ruins. Even though the energy of the inner vitality was powerful, it was not able to loosen even an inch of the chain that was binding him. Clearly, the chain was not binding the physical body. Xiaji was not planning to loosen the bind using this method. All he wanted to do was to take a good look around him. Without the covers of the building, everything became much clearer. On the side of the sat 4 old monks, and behind the monks sat many other monks. All the monks had their heads lowered with a wooden fish in each of their hands as they chanted Buddhist scriptures. The chanting voices and the sound of the wooden fish formed into waves of golden dust as they flowed toward the golden on the ground. Your Highness, it is useless. Just stay with us on Mount Meru for a while. The abbot walked forward slowly, clutching his staff. He stood at a distance, observing the imperial prince bound up at the center as he smiled. He formed a gesture of respect and said, Amitabha. Xiaji said, is this the array of spellbinding formation? The abbot replied, not bad. To think your highness can recognize it. This is Lane Temple's demon-suppressing formation. Once one enters the formation, they would no longer be in control. With that, maybe your highness can now make things clear with me. Where did your highness's Buddhist instrument come from? It belongs to Lane Temple and should be returned to its original owner. The snow filled the air. Atop the pitch-black peak stood numerous ancient temples. However, in the middle of the golden glow, there was a young imperial prince who was bound up. There was no sign of anger on his face, nor was there hatred. There was only calmness. He asked casually, I had just descended from Mount Meru when you announced your judgment to the imperial palace. Today, I have come to Meru as promised, but you're greeting me with this formation. Why is that? The abbot said calmly, the 7th imperial prince is supposed to be a dead man. You should have died on the city walls. A member of the imperial family dying on the city walls would have ignited an outcry throughout the country. After that, your highness's older brothers would have sought revenge on your behalf and brought order onto the lands, and the imperial capital will recover. Unfortunately, your highness has gone against heaven's will and prevented Guifang from invading the city. This is truly a shame. All I'm doing now is to right the wrongs that have happened. Xiaji said, Monk, you did not help to guard the city, nor did you help us fight the exotic tribes, yet now, you're blaming me for succeeding in protecting the city. The abbot replied, every bite and sip is preordained. This was supposed to be a major catastrophe faced by the imperial capital. Be it myself, the director of astronomy, or the junior astronomers, all of our lives are preordained. Since this is a major catastrophe, we should go with the flow as this is our fate. No one can fight against it. After this catastrophe, the Shang dynasty will reach new heights, greater and brighter than before, under the leadership of our new emperor, and defeating Guifang would be just the beginning. However, the 7th imperial prince has made a mess of this situation. That is why, it's not that I have no mercy, but I am granting you the biggest mercy. Your highness was arrogant enough to think that you have protected the city, but in fact, you have disrupted a large-scale turning point of fate. Xiaji lifted his head as he laughed uproariously. So, I shouldn't have protected the city. I should have just allowed the exotic tribes to slaughter the people and destroy the city. I shouldn't have lived, but instead deserved to die at the top of the city walls. The abbot answered, the slaughter and destruction in your eyes is new life, reincarnation, and birth and death in my eyes. How can new life begin without death and destruction? Xiaji heaved a light sigh. The monk in front of him had revealed an important piece of information. The sentence he had said, be it myself, the director of astronomy, or the junior astronomers, all of our lives are preordained. Since this is a major catastrophe, we should go with the flow as this is our fate. No one can go against it, had too many hidden implications. Xiaji had even begun to suspect that the imperial emperor's retreat, even the death of the heir apparent and his 100,000 soldiers at Wolf Restraining Pass, were more than meets the eye. Xiaji said, let me ask one last question. I wonder, who might this new and never-before-seen glorious future emperor of the Shang dynasty that you mentioned be? The abbot said, your highness will meet him. He had after all, only asked of me to trap you and not to kill you. Now, could your highness tell me where you obtained that Buddhist instrument? Xia Ji lifted his head to look at the sky. Abbot, do you know how the Buddhist instruments at Lane Temple are made? The abbot said, naturally, they were refined with great wisdom and great perseverance by Lane Temple's many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas since ancient times. Xia Ji continued, do you know what is great wisdom and great perseverance? The abbot replied honestly, I do not. I am, after all, neither Buddha nor Bodhisattva. The moment he said this, Xia Ji suddenly said, then let me teach you. His words were calm, yet sonorous, much like arhats ringing the large bells in the temple above the clouds. The sound rang within the ears of all the monks. The abbot was shocked as he took 2 steps backward. The Shang dynasty's 7th imperial prince before him now looked completely different from before. His thumb and index finger touched firmly together, like an unmovable mountain, while the rest of his fingers spread out naturally in a relaxed manner, like the floating clouds in the sky. He had actually created a mudra of Tathagata's teachings. Listen to my teachings. His voice was like thunder as it boomed through the snowy night. As the echo of his voice started to dissipate, the Zen-ness surrounding Xia Ji bloomed like a 12th-grade lotus. It was vast and boundless, much like a great river or sea flooding miles of the surroundings. The raging storm and fiercely falling snow sensed his mind and suddenly fell silent. Hundreds of Buddha's statues within the ancient temple sensed his mind and had started buzzing in unison. The little beasts in the snow sensed his mind and popped up their small heads from their hiding holes and caves with their paws placed together as they stared out into the mountain peak in the distance. A great golden augmented shadow of a Buddha appeared behind the imperial prince. Both of the Buddha's feet and insteps were on the thighs as the sole of both feet faced the sky. He sat still in meditating form with his fingers forming a mudra of teachings. Both his eyes were shut as he rode the path of truth to attain samadhi. He appeared to be in deep sleep, emanating an aura of extreme serenity and peace. Atop all 4 of the wheels of the gigantic, golden wording of, the old monks and the other monks were still chanting. However, this time their chanting quickened and their frowns turned tighter by the minute. Every single Sanskrit chain tightened, however, this time, the one bound up was no longer the 7th imperial prince of the Shang dynasty, but the divine form of Tathagata. A shocked look appeared on the face of the usually tranquil abbot. He felt an intense fear creeping within him. He wanted to point at the person in front of him and shout out, unorthodox and evil ways, but he did not dare to because Tathagata's reveal of the true meaning of fear was right in front of his eyes. Buddha was right there in front of him. How could he possibly shout out this accusation? Amidst the snowstorm, Xia Ji sat cross-legged on the ground. He was Tathagata and Tathagata was him. He closed his eyes and Tathagata closed his eyes as well. Suddenly, the hand of Tathagata reached out into the snowy weather and picked a flower, bringing it close to his nose. A slight crack appeared on the lids of his closed eyes. A smile abruptly appeared on the Buddha's face. He smiled with a flower in his hand. A powerful and vast spirituality erupted all around him as it moved along the entangling twines of the Sanskrit chains and flowed toward all the monks. The many monks seated on the golden could not bear the direct hit of this vast spirituality, and at that moment, the spirituality suddenly burst into its highest flames and quickly died out. It only took a while and all the monks now bore white eyebrows, had dry and wrinkly skin, and looked extremely fragile with old age. There was a look of fear and shock in their eyes. The gradually spun slower and finally exploded into dust. Even the chains had turned into dust simultaneously. With a change of the mind, Xia Ji made Tathagata's augmented shadow vanish. He looked at the abbot, who had knelt in panic in front of him, and later glanced around at the monks whose eyebrows had turned white. He asked calmly, "Do you understand now?" Chapter 35. Am I a demon? This is the lost Zen method of Tathagata from Lane Temple. How did you know this? Only the 9th level of the dhyana of the present would be able to create the form of Tathagata. How are you be able to do it? That's it, you possess a medium-caliber Buddhist instrument that belongs to the Lane Temple, not to mention that you have cultivated Zen to such a level. You must have experienced a fateful meeting that involved Lane Temple and received enlightenment from the ancient Buddhas and Bodhisattvas from our temple, and in the process took the Buddhist instrument that has always been at their sides. Although you're just an imperial prince who had only studied scriptures for 2 years. What right or blessings do you have to possess all of this? According to destiny, You are nothing but a mortal imperial prince who should have gotten an early death, an imperial prince who should have been recorded in history to have died in battle at the city walls. What right do you have to receive such power and delay your destiny?" The abbot sat shocked on the snowy ground. He was trembling all over, and after he had experienced the initial shock, his surprise had now turned to anger because he had suddenly realized that this power and inheritance that was supposed to belong to Lane Temple had now become the possession of the imperial prince. How else to explain all that had happened? During this short time, Xia Ji had seen all the different states and thoughts of living beings on the face of the abbot. He asked, "Why don't you think that I'm the reincarnation of the Lord Buddha?" The abbot snapped, "You're not. You're definitely not." Xia Ji asked, "Why is that?" The abbot insisted determinedly, "According to destiny, you are neither deity nor Buddha. You're just a man who should have died in accordance with the catastrophe you are destined to face. Even though you are alive right now, it is just an anomaly. The heavens may be unpredictable, but it has never tolerated anomalies. What sort of destiny have you seen? I will never tell you. You will. Do you think I'm afraid of death or torture?" The abbot suddenly laughed out loud. There was a vague look of fear in his eyes, but it also showed a shred of determination. What did he fear and what was he determined to achieve? Xia Ji grabbed the abbot. Since he was unwilling to answer, then Xia Ji would torture him. However, the abbot was no weakling. He gave a sudden shout, "Ha!" A layer of golden glow shone from his palm while he was lifting his hand. The golden glow quickly encompassed it like metal liquid, covering the lines and pores of his palm entirely, and was shaped into a big hand made of a block of pure gold. Demon subduing Vajrapani. The abbot suddenly flew into the air, like an arrow that had been suddenly shot into the air. His energy was just like a sharp arrow slicing through as he brought down the big golden hand of pure gold down toward Xia Ji. In the process, a circle of leaves appeared within the golden glow. They were the leaves of the datura flowers. The datura was considered an energy core in certain religions and teachings. It represented the manifestation of real Vientiane Senli of the universe, a Zen circle that circulated and introspected. This abbot of the Lane Temple was not fully enlightened about the Zen circle, nor was he able to fully unleash the extreme power of the demon subduing Vajrapani, which was an intention that could only happen to 1 in a million. Otherwise, the datura flower would have bloomed in his palms, emerged from his mouth, grew on his belly, and bloomed after every step he took. Even though the circle of leaves was not able to manifest into a divine form, it still held the form of a skill that could truly subdue a demon. It transformed from a light glow into a majestic one, and by the time it appeared in front of Xia Ji, it had already formed into a giant hand of Vajrapani that shone with glaring brightness. Xia Ji reached out a finger and blocked this hand of Vajrapani. "Abbot," Xia Ji said, "destiny is, after all, but an illusion. What are you afraid of? Tell me and your destiny shall continue. If you don't say a thing, today will be the end of your destiny." The abbot did not reply. He circulated more and more of his inner vitality over and over as he tried his best to hammer past that finger. However, the finger was like the gigantic sun hanging majestically in the vast skies. It had an abundance of highly pure inner strength. Every push the abbot made would only encourage the strength of the finger to escalate in retaliation. Even after burning up every ounce of spirituality and blood within him, to the point of using reserves of inner vitality he had never tapped into before, the strength of the finger would still rise every time, just to the point of barely being enough to outdo him. The abbot finally understood that the imperial prince standing right in front of him did not use his full strength. No matter what the abbot did, it was no more than an act of an overconfident buffoon being way over his head. It was too late for him to make an escape now. The fight between both inner strengths was like two armies charging toward one another. Once they engaged, there was no easy way to retreat, or it would end with the army's defeat, like toppling a mountain. That was why the abbot suddenly sighed and said, "Seventh Imperial Prince, I have a suggestion. Tell me. If you are unwilling to be a monk, why don't you just be the abbot of Lane Temple? You have been enlightened by the ancient Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. By doing so, you would be bearing the responsibility of your karma and the rebuilding of Lane Temple to its former glory. Once you become a monk, you will no longer belong to any home, and the men, Xia Ji, would no longer exist in this world. That way, the destiny and sins of Xia Ji would disappear. You would be able to guarantee a life of peace and security." Xia Ji said, Did destiny tell you this? The abbot shook his head. Then he pressed, once you turn to a life in the temple, you will naturally wash away the karma upon you. Xiaji said, if an abbot's karma would be washed clean, why would you choose to be a loyal lapdog of the new emperor and help him guard his door here? The abbot replied, I have never been loyal to anyone. I'm just following the call of heaven's will. Xiaji remained stoic. The tip of his finger suddenly glowed bright like a blazing sun in summer rising amidst the cold, dark winter night. The inner vitality of the burning flames escalated in an instant as it pressed once more against the big, golden hand. The golden earth welcomed a falling star. Crack, crack. The ground cracked and the circle of datura leaves shattered. The inner vitality of the Lane Temple's abbot was completely obliterated at this point. His palm was now invaded by a searing burn from inner vitality, as if raging flames were being born within his body. It was boiling his internal organs, nerves, and blood veins. His body was the city wall. His internal organs were the people. His inner vitality were the soldiers. The city wall was brought down and the soldiers were exterminated. The next step was to slaughter the city. However, Xiaji paused. When the abbot was clinging to a shred of consciousness, he asked, will you talk now? If I talk now, I won't be able to attain spiritual enlightenment in the next life, the abbot grunted, his face turning purple from the effort. With that, the light in his eyes vanished. He had committed suicide. Xiaji did not pull back his inner vitality of the 9 suns. It was not long before a boiling mist of blood vaporized from all orifices of the abbot's body. With that, Xiaji finally lifted his finger and did not even give the dead abbot another glance. Instead, he turned toward a little novice monk and said gently, bring me to the secret of Tathagata. The little novice monk trembled. He had seen how the imperial prince defeated so many of his masters and seniors with his own eyes. He knelt to the ground in fright and could not stop shivering from fear. He could only pray silently in his heart to the deities in heaven to open their eyes and exterminate this demon immediately. Xiaji saw the novice monk had kept silent, so he smiled and said, the abbot had instructed you to take me to the book. A monk should not speak falsely. If karma is at stake, the abbot will be the one bearing it and not you. His words resolved the struggle within the little novice monk. The little novice monk cursed the imperial prince in his heart, but the words from his mouth trembled as he said, Your Highness, follow me. This time, the little novice monk held a lamp and led the imperial prince through several turnings while in a despondent state and finally came to a hidden little loft. He placed the lamp next to a wall and fiddled around with a mechanism. He pushed the mechanism from outside and within the library loft and soon, under the shining lamp, 3 7 treasures secret boxes could be seen placed horizontally in a row. Your Highness, the secret of Tathagata, is placed in the box on the left. Right at that moment, rapid footsteps could be heard coming from the mountain trail outside the loft. Many monks in yellow robes were holding a disciplinary bronze rod in each of their hands as they surrounded the place on the snowy ground. The leader had thick eyebrows and eyes like a leopard. He held a torch in his hand, which lightened up the world of falling white snow with its bright radiance. Xiaji walked toward the end of the little loft and opened the box. With the help of the light from the lamp, he found an ancient book lying within. The pages of the book were old and a scent of history wafted from it. The writings on the front page looked new as it bore the words, The Secret of Tathagata. It had the bearings of a great master. Xiaji tore off the front page with ease and crumpled it into a ball as he threw it to the side. The footsteps outside drew closer. All the monks in yellow had grim expressions. They quickly got into formation outside the little loft. 18 of them formed the Bronze Men formation, 18 of 18 was known as the Arhat formation. Demon suppressing was used to subdue the spirituality while the Arhat formation was used to subdue demons with physical manifestations. Only a temple with such profound heritage would possess these 2 major formations. Even though a long time had passed and each use would mean one less for the future, they have decided to go on with it in the end. Xiaji flipped the first page open. Thus I have heard, once one has lost everything, there will no longer be repeated troubles and your heart will be carefree. One will be released from one's heart, one will be released when wisdom is gained. As he was reading the book aloud, the glow of fire could be seen coming from the door cracks of the little loft. The legs of the little novice monk, whose name was Yuan Ji, could not stop shaking. Xiaji suddenly asked him, "Little master, are you afraid of demons?" Seek Zen, with sincerity, be hard. At work, wiping the altars clean. I'm not afraid. Am I a demon? Your Highness, no. Xiaji tore off the first page of the book and threw the page out casually. The paper flew out suddenly and sliced through the air, immediately slitting Yuan Ji, who was standing at the door, at the throat. Before the little novice monk could react, death had already come calling to him. Just before he lost complete consciousness, Xiaji could be heard saying softly, "Run after the abbot. He should not be far off on the road to the netherworld." Chapter 36. Why would the sky block my sight? Ho! 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 The little novice monk clutched his throat as blood flowed freely through his fingers. He took a step backward and knocked onto the threshold of the door as he fell face up. He knocked the little loft's door open as he tumbled outward from within and tumbled onto the snowy ground. His eyes stared out at the many monk warriors who were in formation, led by his master Shirkong. The wind and snow filled up the little loft. Xiaji lifted his hand to pick up the lamp within the loft as he continued to flip to the second page of The Secret of Tathagata, quietly reading it. Releasing oneself of all burdens would allow one to reap one's benefits. One should strive to be kind and wisdom shall come to them. When one's heart is released, one's heart will be carefree. He was fully focused on his reading, as if the Arhat formation outside the door had nothing to do with him. This focus, which ignored everything happening around him, created an atmosphere of zenness and serenity that enveloped him. Shirkong lifted the torch in his hand as his thick brows knitted tightly. His leopard-like eyes were glaring as he said harshly, "Your Highness, you have chosen the demon's path. All of us are aware of the risks, but we are still determined to put a stop to Your Highness." Xiaji said in surprise, "What are you stopping me from?" "The Lane Temple is using the demon-suppressing formation to bind me. Shouldn't I be defending myself?" Shirkong said, "Your Highness has obtained the heritage of Lane Temple. You possess the dhyana of the present and have a Buddhist instrument of medium caliber from the Lane Temple in your hands. Not only did you not return them to Lane Temple, but you have killed the monks of Lane Temple. 400 chanting monks, 4 of our senior masters and senior brothers, and the abbot had all died at your hands. What are you if not a demon? You are a demon, and it is only natural that I restrain you and put a stop to your actions, in order to prevent you from harming all living beings." Xiaji did not refute. He said calmly, "You are at least right about one thing." "What was I right about?" "I am a demon." With that, he flipped to the next page of the book peacefully and casually, tearing off the previous page at the same time. The page of the scripture floated above his fingers and burned into ash. Shirkong's eyes almost split open at the seams from witnessing this. This book was a hidden treasure. The door blew into the loft along with the wind. It blew hard and sudden, causing the books within the loft to simultaneously flip and stop. They created a loud and continuous fluttering sound. It sounded like waves and wind soaring through the forest trees, but this young imperial prince stood amidst the extreme waves without distracting thoughts and was calm and peaceful. Shirkong finally gave a sigh of relief, but he no longer dared to barge into the loft recklessly. He took a glance at the little novice monk who had fallen in front of the door and felt a shred of anger in his heart. If it was not for this novice monk leading the demon to the location and unraveled the mechanism to retrieve the book for him, they would not be so agitated right now. At that moment, silence fell within and outside the loft. While waiting, Shirkong turned back to glance somewhere afar. There were more than 400 chanting monks who grew white eyebrows within a second, had their spiritualities wilted, and had contracted a slight cold in this climate of ice and snow. Otherwise, they were all dead. The abbot had taken up the fight on his own and had ended up being killed by the imperial prince, unable to do anything to match up to him. However, that did not mean that Lane Temple was unable to suppress the imperial prince. If Lane Temple could be so easily bullied around, they would have been exterminated by those unorthodox clans or demonic tribes long ago. The Buddhist path was considered an orthodox path and was at opposing sides to unorthodox clans and demonic tribes. That being said, Lane Temple was able to survive to date because it relied on the protection of the formations. There were 2 formations. One was passed down from ancient times and was set within Lane Temple without any way of removing it. Although it was unable to travel to distant lands to exterminate demons, it was capable of ensuring Lane Temple's safety and security. these two major formations. One of them was the demon-suppressing formation. The demon-suppressing formation was a spiritual bind. No matter how powerful the demon was, all it required was for chanting monks to chant the scripture, and it would create a strong spiritual strength that would form into a sort of suppression that will render the demon immobile. Unfortunately, this seventh imperial prince of the Shang dynasty had a fateful meeting that had enlightened him on the 9th level of the dhyana of the present. He had used a power that originally belonged to Lane Temple to counterattack the formation from a spiritual level that enabled him to break out. Otherwise, the dhyana of the present may be a superior level spiritual Zen method, but it would not be able to make a direct attack, nor would it be able to make 400 chanting monks endure a counterattack that reduced them to old men, which resulted in their deaths. Even though Shirkong was of pure mind and heart, the thought of this made him burn with fury. After all, the fateful meeting the 7th imperial prince had enjoyed was supposed to have belonged to Lane Temple. The second was the Arhat formation. The Arhat formation was able to consolidate and escalate the power of the warrior monks to create a divine form of an 80-foot golden body of an Arhat. It was extremely strong and could easily slay dragons and subdue tigers. The abbot had initially thought only to entrap the imperial prince, and had never thought about executing him. That was why he did not initiate the Arhat formation. Otherwise, this imperial prince would have been put to death if he had come empty-handed. After 3 hours, Xia Ji was finally done with the secret of Tathagata. A gold skill bead appeared within his primal spirit. A shred of astonishment appeared in Xia Ji's usually calm eyes. He would not have been shocked regardless of what skill bead had appeared, but this skill bead was a skill he had obtained before. The dhyana of the present. This was the first time he had obtained 2 of the same skill beads. Logically speaking, the same green and white skill beads should have been replicated numerous times, but he had never experienced it. There was even a point when Xia Ji had thought that there was no possible way for the same skill beads to be obtained repeatedly. However, this hypothesis had just been proven wrong. He immediately used this gold skill bead. The skill bead was crushed and a golden flow hidden with tremendous spellbinding magic integrated into every corner of his body and mind. After that, he began to experience it in detail. The dhyana of the present turned from its gold sheen to a deeper gold color. In response, the Trailokya dhyana's red also became a slightly deeper color. The color change meant that Xia Ji had a deeper understanding of this Zen method. The dhyana of the present remained at 9th level, but it did seem that it had attained a slightly higher level than the 9th level. He carefully experienced the change. In the past, he had used the dhyana of the present to communicate with heaven and earth. That was why he was able to get the wind and snow to understand his thoughts and not allow them to fall onto his body. He was able to get the moonbeam to understand his thoughts and form into a heavenly dragon. He was able to get the little beasts in the mountain to understand his thoughts and get them all out of their holes with the paws placed together. However, this Zen method was only limited to heaven, earth, and all other living beings but mankind. Now, this barrier had been broken. He was able to get all living beings to understand his thoughts. What were his thoughts? If destiny wanted to crush him, his thought would be to change that destiny. If heaven wanted to crush him, his thought would be to overturn heaven. He looked at the torch outside the door of the loft and the many pairs of eyes. All the monks were standing strictly in attention, watching him as if he was a demon. Xia Ji breathed out a sigh of cloudy mist in the deep winter and clenched his left hand. His inner vitality started to escalate and a flame immediately burned, the secret of Tathagata. Shirkong, who was outside the door, felt a raging fire burn into his blood as it rushed to his head, his eyes looking like they were about to explode. He shouted in a rage, "You thief, how dare you!" Xia Ji threw the burning book into the air. The ancient book had already burnt to ashes in the raging flames. When it fell to the ground, the wind blew across it as it embroiled within the wind and turned into a vortex of ashes, and in the end, to dust. Shirkong bellowed furiously, "Get into the Arhat formation." His voice sounded in the air. A gigantic gold appeared on the surface of the earth as it spun speedily while rising into the air. It formed into many gold lights not unlike fireflies as they entered into the bodies of the warrior monks. Go! The group of monks roared in anger as they shouted in tidy unison. 324 disciplinary bronze rods hit the ground heavily. It was like the appearance of thunder as a series of continuing explosions were let off. It was like all 324 warrior monks had their spirituality clutched together as one as they were guided by the gold firefly-like lights. They gathered and consolidated within the void of the snowstorm. Their spirituality was the body while the gold lights were the skin. An 80-foot figure appeared from top to bottom. The figure's eyes were shut tight, but it was filled with power and prestige. After a moment, the figure gradually formed a soul. Its form was not limiting and had a curiously unique shape. It looked stern and Buddha-like, and held a long, golden rod in its hand. Its eyes opened slowly. They were clear as a lake's reflection and raging. Like an inferno. The power of the formation had enabled the warrior monks to gather in one location and display a strength that far surpassed their individual bodies. The eyes of the 80-foot Arhat's golden form looked down at Xiaoji coldly. There was no room for negotiation for both parties. The Arhat's augmented shadow lifted his giant hand. The golden rod was raised high against the arch of the sky. The current in the air tore open as the wind and snow's strength gathered around the rod's shadow. It came together at great speed from all directions, condensing into an iron-gray vortex that blinded all sight. It occupied the sky as it circled about the long, golden rod, much like an encircling dark cloud. It seemed like an attack was imminent, although it would not be from the long, golden rod, but rather the accumulating wind and snow that was gathered into a pressurized state. This was the core power of Lane Temple, the Arhat formation. Xiaoji lifted his head to look at the Arhat's form, the shadow of the golden rod, and the accumulating wind and snow. He asked softly, "Why would you block my sight?" Amidst the bustling noise, the sound of misery floated across Lake Watching. Deep inside the palace, the imperial princess was sitting where her older brother was once imprisoned. She was reading a book quietly. She hungrily absorbed the dark, bloody, and hypocritical knowledge as she gave deep thought to the rules of this game of power. Her fine, soft, and yellowish hair had been tied up into a graceful-looking bun. Her young, tender eyes now had a look of tranquility in them. She had put on a set of splendorous black clothes that covered her pale, petite body. The piteous look was now lost, and there was an added sense of mystery and magnificent beauty to her. She was as lovely as the white plum with a grace that endured the harsh winter. She was facing a mirror and she looked at herself reflected from within. She moved her body elegantly, but mechanically. It felt a little unfamiliar, a little strange. Suddenly, a soft scratching at the door could be heard between the door and the threshold. Xia Xiaosu stood up calmly to open the door. Outside the door, a white fox was lying on its belly against the threshold. It lifted its eyes to look at her. Part 3 of the series ends here. Thank you for watching and listening. If you find it interesting, please give us a like, a comment and a subscription so that we have the motivation to make the next videos.